The hallway in our home was a narrow stretch of chaos. Drop cloths crumpled underfoot, the work lamp's harsh glow slicing through the dark, the air thick with the sharp tang of fresh paint and the low hum of a ventilation fan. It was late, my husband away on a business trip, and I was there with Cole the painter hired through a friend of my husband checking the progress on our walls. The fan's drone filled the silence, and when Cole stepped closer, his presence tall, sinewy, pressed into my space, his intensity pushing too deep, stirring something reckless. I stayed silent, letting the hallway's haze consume me. I was 34. Married to Tom, a man whose love was steady but worn like a wall in need of repainting. Cole was different, lean, weathered, with hands that gripped a paint roller with quiet strength and eyes that burned with unspoken want. His paint-splattered shirt, loose at the collar, clung to his frame, the lamp's light tracing his sharp collarbone. My top, a fitted white blouse tucked into jeans, hugged my curves, catching the faint glow, and his gaze lingered, slow, deliberate, waking, a hunger I'd buried deep. My wedding ring glinted, a faint protest, but it couldn't cool the fire rising in my chest, a heat that pulsed beneath my skin. The house was a distant murmur beyond the hallway, its life drowned by the fan's hum and the faint rustle of drop cloths. Cole moved to a wall, his steps calm, almost deliberate, but his eyes were wild, untamed, searching. I stood by a ladder, my jeans brushing my thighs, revealing a sliver of skin as I shifted, and his gaze followed, dark, possessive, stirring, something dangerous. I should have left after checking the paint, kept Tom's voice clear in my mind, his calm words over dinner, his hand on mine. But I stayed, and the night grew thicker, heavier, the air pressing against my skin like a touch. He handed me a rag, its fabric damp from paint thinner, cool against my fingers. "Wipe this spot," he said, his voice low, rough like the scrape of a brush on drywall. I took the rag, our fingers brushing a spark that shot through me, settling low, aching, unbearable. The cloth was rough, but it was nothing compared to the fire in my veins, the want that grew with every glance. My blouse clung to my skin, teasing the curve of my hips, the swell of my breasts, and his eyes caught it, darkening with a desire that made my knees weak, my breath catch in my throat. The lamp flickered, casting shadows that danced across his face, rugged and magnetic, his jaw tight with focus. My heart pounded a rhythm that matched the pulse of desire running through me, loud and relentless. Cole's gaze was a weight pressing against me, and I felt it, every inch of me alive, craving, screaming for something I shouldn't want. "Smooth it out," he said, pointing to a smudge, his voice, a soft command like he was painting more than the wall. I could have grabbed my keys, left the hallway, called Tom to check in. But my body leaned toward him, my skin begging for his touch, his pull, the heat of his nearness. The hallway was a world apart, the house forgotten, its walls closing in. His hand hovered near my shoulder, so close I could feel its warmth, but he held back, waiting, his breath uneven. "Keep it even," he said, his eyes locking on mine, urging me to stay, to surrender. The guilt was there, Tom's face flashing in my mind, his smile as we planned a home project, his trust a quiet anchor. But the want was a blaze, drowning out everything else, a fire that licked at my resolve. I clutched the rag, my breath shallow, my body trembling with the weight of what I was doing. The night was a canvas, and I was already brushed into it. The fan's hum seemed to sync with my pulse, the hallway shrinking to the space between us. I shifted closer, the rag slipping slightly, my fingers brushing his as I adjusted my grip. His presence was a stroke, raw and unyielding, pulling me deeper. I thought of Tom, his steady voice, his hand on my back, but Cole's nearness was here now, overwhelming. My blouse felt tighter, my skin hotter, every nerve awake under his gaze. The latter was a trap, and I was already caught, the air thick with what we weren't saying. The hallway felt smaller now, the shadows tightening as the work lamp's glow bathed us in a stark yellow haze. Cole's shirt was taut, flecked with paint splatters outlining the lean muscles that flexed as he smoothed a roller over the wall. My blouse was a traitor, hugging my curves, the silk heavy with the hallway's stale warmth, my skin prickling under his gaze, damp with a faint sheen of sweat. The rag sat heavy in my hand, its rough texture a stark contrast to the heat building inside me, his presence making me dizzy, drunk on the promise of his touch. The house's murmur was gone, replaced by the fan's steady hum, a sound that vibrated through me like a pulse urging me closer. "You're good with details," he said, his voice rough like he was coding more than the wall. But he didn't move his body, a magnet pulling me closer, his fingers steady as they worked. I thought of Tom, his gentle hands, his quiet love, the life we'd built, a routine of shared evenings, predictable as a dried coat of paint. But Cole's presence was a wet brush, raw, untamed, filling the empty spaces Tom never could, spaces I hadn't known were there. My fingers twitched, aching to touch him, to feel the heat of his skin, the rhythm of his desire pulsing beneath it. The guilt was a sharp sting burning, but it only made the ache deeper, more desperate, a need that clawed at my core. The lamp pulsed, casting shadows that seemed to sway with my heart, erratic and unsteady. My jeans shifted, teasing my thighs, the silk of my blouse outlining my breasts, and I felt exposed, alive, wanted in a way I hadn't been in years, not since the early days with Tom. Cole stepped closer, his body so near I could smell the paint thinner on his skin, mixed with the faint musk of sweat and want. His fingers brushed my hand as he took the rag, a fleeting touch that sent a shiver through me, my body leaning toward him without permission, drawn to his heat. "Clean it here," he said, his voice a low murmur, urging me to wipe more than the wall. My hands moved over the rag, its texture rough and damp, a wordless plea my body couldn't hide, my fingers trembling slightly. The guilt was a scream, Tom's voice echoing his laugh as we painted a room together, his hand brushing mine over the table. But it was no match for the fire in my veins, the need that consumed me, burning hotter with every second. I thought of Tom, his face soft in sleep, his trust a quiet weight, but Cole's touch was real, burning, pulling me under like a current I couldn't fight. My fingers grazed his arm, an instinct I couldn't control, the silk whispering against my skin, betraying my desire, amplifying it. His eyes darkened, locking on mine, a silent command to surrender, to let go. The hallway was a cocoon, now shutting out the world, the fan's hum a relentless pulse. His hand slid to my elbow, light but deliberate, and I gasped, the sound swallowed by the hallway's hush, my breath catching in my throat. The guilt was there, Tom's trust a ghost in my mind, but Cole's hands were real, promising a pleasure I'd forgotten existed, a thrill that made my skin sing. I leaned closer, my breasts brushing his arm, the contact sending a jolt through me that settled low, aching, unbearable, my thighs clenching against the rising heat. The lamp's glow danced across his face, making him look like a man painting my ruin, his eyes sharp with intent. "Blended in," he whispered, his breath warm against my ear, sending a shiver through me that made my heart race, my body trembling with need. I couldn't hold back, didn't want to. My skin was on fire, my pulse pounding like the fan's rhythm, relentless and consuming. My hands found his wrist, feeling the heat through his sleeve, the rapid beat of his pulse matching mine, a shared rhythm that pulled me deeper. His presence hit me like a stroke, igniting every nerve. I was drowning in him, in the reckless thrill of being wanted this way in this forbidden space. The drop cloth was a trap, and I was already pressed against it, the air thick with what we couldn't undo. The hallway was a crucible now, the work lamp's harsh light forging something dangerous between us, the air so thick it felt like it could snap. Cole's hands were on me, steady, possessive, guiding my fingers along the rag as if he were painting my soul. The glow was stark, but searing, highlighting every curve of my blouse, my skin prickling under his gaze, slick with the hallway's heat and my own rising desire. His touch was deliberate, each movement a stroke in a canvas I couldn't resist, and I followed willingly, recklessly, my body alive with a hunger I couldn't name. My thighs trembled as they brushed against the ladder, inviting him closer, begging for more. His fingers slid higher, grazing the bare skin of my neck beneath my blouse, and I moaned, the sound soft, desperate, swallowed by the fan's hum, my breath hitching in my chest. My body arched toward him, craving the contact, the sin, every nerve screaming for release. The guilt was a jagged edge cutting through me, sharp and relentless, but it only made the desire sharper, more urgent, a blade that carved deeper with every glance. His lips brushed my temple, a slow, burning trail that made my head spin. My hands gripping his shoulders, nails digging into his shirt, anchoring me to this moment. The shadows danced, mirroring the chaos inside me, every movement a confession I couldn't take back. "Feel the finish," he murmured, his voice rough with need, his breath hot against my cheek, urging me to sink deeper into the moment, to let it consume me. But I couldn't pull back, wouldn't pull back, not now. The lamp caught the sheen of sweat on his skin, making him look like a man coating my ruin, his eyes blazing with a hunger that matched mine. My hands slid down his chest, feeling the lean muscle beneath his shirt, the rapid beat of his heart syncing with mine, a rhythm that drowned out the world. My jeans clung tighter, outlining every curve, and his eyes followed, dark and unyielding, drinking in every inch of me, leaving me exposed. His hand moved higher, tracing the curve of my ribcage through my blouse, his fingers brushing just beneath my breast, and I gasped, my body shuddering under his touch, a wave of heat crashing through me. The hallway was a haze, the world reduced to the space between us, to the heat of his hands, the rhythm of my breath ragged and uneven. I thought of Tom, his quiet love, his trust, his hand on mine as we laughed over coffee, his voice planning our future. But the thought was fleeting, swept away by the storm of desire, a tide I couldn't fight. Every touch was a stroke in a surge of surrender, and I rode it willingly, chasing the fire, the danger, the ecstasy that burned through me. His lips brushed my jaw, his breath ragged, and I tilted my head back, offering more, offering everything, my body trembling under the weight of my need. My heart pounded, caught between guilt and desire, but the desire was a tidal wave crashing over me, drowning out everything else. His hand slid lower, pressing my hips against the ladder, and I moaned loud now, the sound mingling with the fan's hum, raw and unfiltered. I was his, and he knew it, his touch binding me in ways I'd never be clean of, each moment a step further from who I'd been. Then it came, a sharp buzz from my phone. Tom's name lighting up the screen, breaking the spell like a spilled can of paint. His trust flashed in my mind, clear, and accusing a weight I couldn't ignore, heavy as the guilt that surged back. I pushed against Cole's chest, my hands shaking, my breath ragged, my body still humming with want. He stepped back, his eyes dark with hunger and something like regret, his presence lingering in the air like an echo. It was too late. The line had been crossed, and I'd stayed silent, letting the heat mark me forever. I stumbled away from the ladder, my legs unsteady, my blouse still clinging to me like a confession damp with sweat and desire. The lamp's glow was dim now, but it couldn't hide the heat still burning inside me, a fire that refused to die. I grabbed my phone, my fingers fumbling clumsy with the weight of what I'd done, and rushed to the living room, the cool night air hitting me like a shock as I left the hallway. The walk to my couch was a blur of moonlight and guilt, my heart pounding with what I'd let happen, what I'd stayed silent for. Tom was still away, but his presence loomed, his face soft in my mind, peaceful, trusting, as I stood in the kitchen staring at the sink, the guilt twisting like a knife in my gut. The days that followed were a fog of want and shame, a haze I couldn't shake. I went through the motions, cooking breakfast, answering Tom's calls, but my mind was back in that hallway, back with Cole's hands, his eyes, his intensity that echoed in my chest. I saw him again in the driveway, his gaze catching mine as he loaded his tools. We didn't speak, but we didn't need to. The air between us charged a silent promise of what had been, what still might be if I let it. I told myself I'd stay away, keep things professional, be the good wife Tom deserved. But every night as I lay awake, my body burned with the memory of a touch that wasn't his, a moment that rewired everything I thought I was. The guilt was a living thing now, clawing at me, a shadow that followed me through every chore, every smile I forced for Tom. But the desire was just as alive, a current that wouldn't fade, sparking every time I passed the hallway, every time I smelled fresh paint in my mind. Cole was just a painter, a man I'd hired, but he'd brushed a stroke in me I couldn't erase. I'd gone too far, stayed silent, and now I'd never be whole again. The hallway, the paint, his hands, they were branded into me, a mark I'd carry forever, a secret humming beneath my skin. I tried to focus on Tom, on the life we'd built, the quiet moments that once felt enough, his hand brushing mine as we watched TV, his voice planning our next project. But the hallway lingered, its shadows creeping into my thoughts. Cole's intensity, a pulse I couldn't unfeel. I avoided him, kept my distance, but every creak of the house, every flicker of a light brought it all back, the heat, the want, the guilt. I was torn, split between the woman I was and the one I'd let myself become in that hallway, and I didn't know how to reconcile them, how to live with both. If this story set your heart racing, smash that like button, let it burn bright. If you think I'm a fool for staying in that hallway, hit dislike, I deserve the shade. Drop a comment. What would you do in my place faced with that kind of heat? Subscribe for more stories that cut deep, raw, and unfiltered. Share this with someone who needs to feel the spark, and check out the next one. The truth is messy, electric, and worth every jolt. Catch you soon.